All right, and we are started. So, welcome everyone. Today we have a great session in the speaker series. So we've got a panel discussion today about how to talk about tech within your organization. And we have two speakers who I will introduce more fully in a moment, Kathy Larson and Nick Filarelli. They'll be discussing their experiences, taking your questions around their experiences. I think it's going to be really beneficial because you're in the spot right now where you're talking to folks within your organization. Very timely. And then we have our first vendor spotlight. So we have Ken Smith from Next Gen AT. So we're reserving the last 15 minutes of the speaker series now for vendor presentation and questions and answers. So that's going to take us through the full hour. So looking forward to all of this. So let me start off with the panel discussion. So how do you talk about tech within your organization? So we have two folks joining us today. We have Nick Filarelli. He's the program director at Core Services of Northeast Tennessee. He's worked for the last 17 years with individuals in IDD, and he began his career as a DSP. And for the past 6 years, he functioned as an enabling tech champion for Core Services. So a lot of experience around enabling tech. In addition, he transformed it into a technology-first organization. You might actually have questions around what that means. And promoting the use of technology to help people achieve true independence. So we're really happy to have Nick here with us. And we have Kathy Nisham Larson. Kathy is the Director of Remote Supports and Assistive Tech at Sevita REM in Minnesota. Kathy spearheads the implementation of remote support technology across Minnesota. She currently sits on the board for Minnesota Networking and Education of Assistive Technology, that's MNMET, and the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance and the Stroke Association and the ARRM Technology Resource Committee. So we got a lot of experience coming to the table, and I am going to kick it off by simply asking them to summarize some of the highlights of their experiences and their pathway through talking about organizations with assistive tech. Kathy, do you want to start off?
Sure, I'm happy to. So if I'm talking about the REM journey, I kind of go back a little bit to when Minnesota originally started passing legislation that would allow us to use technology for supervision. And that was back in 2014. So we did open our first house doing AOST in 2014, but then we had a major slowdown. We really didn't have the I guess a champion or the knowledge base to look at implementing technology any further at that point. So we went along with just the one home in our area and, until probably about 2020, when we really got a lot more serious about implementation of technology. Even before COVID, we were getting more serious about it to the point where I started taking on more of a leadership role to push forward and start talking about technology. So in 2020, we opened 6 additional homes with technology supervision. In 2021, only 4 homes. But then we really saw a major increase in 22. We opened 22 homes with technology supervision. In 23, we opened 40 homes with technology supervision. And now so far this year, we're about 25 homes that we've opened with technology supervision. So we've really grown, and I think a lot of that has to do with having somebody who has the experience and the information and having that communication that you're going to be kind of talking about more today or hearing more about today on how do we move things forward in regards to development of technology. So right now in Minnesota, we probably have over 80 homes that are using technology supervision in some way, form, or fashion. And then assistive technology, that's a whole nother area that we probably run about 100 homes that are using some form of assistive technology or enabling technology. And I will say, before we go too much further, I know every state has their own terminology or vernacular in regards to technology. So remote supports, assistive tech, enabling tech, all of that. I think each state does it a little different right now, but I think you'll be able to get a feel for what we're talking about as we move forward. So if I'm not speaking your language, bear with me.
Great, thanks, Kathy. And Nick, could you chime in a little bit with your journey in Tennessee?
Certainly. Well, I work for a smaller provider organization in the northeast corner of the state, which I feel like has really helped us to be able to kind of experiment easily. We don't answer to any larger organization. We have a small board of directors that manages us. So, and they really trust us to try a lot of crazy things. So they were totally on board when we started experimenting with enabling technology and remote supports. But I think what we found is that everything we've done within our organization is extremely replicable. And across the state of Tennessee, there are many other providers, including very large providers that are using enabling technology to support significant percentage of the people that they serve. So Tennessee began its enabling technology journey in 2017, and it was a pretty foreign concept to all of us, me and as much as anybody. So I think I can definitely speak to the growing pains of that being such a foreign idea when you have people that have made careers in the kind of shelter and protect and paid on-site staff support model of providing services, and how different that is and how that tends to clash with, particularly maybe people in your medical department or skeptical family members. And it's definitely been an uphill battle, and we've learned a lot along the way because we didn't really know what we were doing in the beginning. But Tennessee has been very supportive and has really offered a lot of guidance to providers that are, they're really pushing providers in the state to move in this direction. And it sounds like Arkansas is doing the same and has been for the last couple of years. And this latest effort seems like a really good push in that direction. I'm actually fairly familiar with Arkansas. I've visited the state several times, spoken to providers, worked closely with ASN for a while, attended some of your conferences, and spoke to a committee on the legislature about enabling technology. So I'm somewhat familiar with your state and what's happening there, and it's really cool, and I'm excited to share some of our experience.
So one of the areas that communication within organizations or within any of the stakeholders throughout the state, I'm sure you are faced with common barriers, right? Common objections. And could you talk a little bit, you both talk about what those, 2 or 3 main objections are and sort of how you've addressed them successfully in the past.
That could be a whole presentation in itself, but some of the main barriers that I saw in the beginning was in regards to inside the agency, because we had barriers inside the agency and then we had barriers outside the agency. So really for us inside the agency, it was in the beginning really looking to who are the major stakeholders in this and speaking to what it is that was important to them. Everything from how it increases the independence of the individual to what is the financial benefit to the company for this and what is the long-term benefit, and really addressing and talking overall about the staffing crisis that we're all experiencing right now. That is only expected to get worse, not necessarily better. So how can technology be a solve in that? So really one of our main barriers was around just getting the information out there, what's available, and speaking to that. I often said, and I still say this in almost every presentation I do, that if technology had been at the level it is today, 30, 40 years ago when people first started moving out of institutions, I can guarantee you that technology would have been on the top of the list of the discussion from the beginning, really to help more than anything else increase personal independence and autonomy. They would have been speaking to this and including it, and it wouldn't be such a foreign concept. It's a foreign concept right now because I think people don't understand it or know it very well, and what the opportunities are there within the agencies, as well as the individuals themselves and the case managers and everybody else. So there is a lot of learning. When I talked about, when we originally opened to when the time that we actually started growing in using technology, there's a significant gap. And a lot of that is around education, training, helping people know how the product works, and speaking to the safety of it. Which brings me to the other barrier, is fear. There is a fear of not having a live person right there on site. And we had to do a lot of education around how technology is supervision. It's just supervision provided in a different way. So instead of providing it with a person right there on site, we are doing supervision. And sometimes the supervision with technology is better than the technology of a staff person right there, especially I think in regards to seizure technology that's out there these days. If in the middle of the night, my staff is going, or our staff is going in to check somebody in their bedroom every couple hours, you're not going to necessarily notice a seizure. But if an individual is wearing a seizure detection device or a bed pad that detects seizures, we are potentially able to know right away when that's occurring and be able to be brought in there right away to help address the issue. So there's many situations where technology can be much better. I could give you lots of examples, but then I wouldn't give Nick an opportunity to speak. So, but yes, those are the two big ones. I think knowledge base, fear, those are the two big ones that we ran across.
Yeah, so I'm gonna echo what Kathy said a little bit, because I think she hit the nail on the head. The biggest objection is health and safety. And it's really easy when you're in the planning process to get bogged down in the weeds about the what ifs, and you'll have people in that process, they're gonna ask, what if this happens and what if that happens? And you get to a point where you're kind of drive yourself crazy trying to mitigate every possible risk within a person's life, which is just impossible even within our own lives. So I think what helped us be successful was, before we ever talked technology, we had gone through a person-centered journey. We'd really done a lot of work in educating our staff on self-directed supports and making sure that people are dictating their own life. And then, part of that is explaining the dignity that comes with risk. We don't keep people in a bubble, because that's not a dignified life. And then I think if your workforce especially, but also your family members, persons supported themselves, I think if they understand that, they're more going to have a better understanding of what we're trying to do, and realize that, as Kathy said, technology is not a lack of support, but rather an alternate means of providing that same support. And I'm going to agree with what you said, that oftentimes technology can be less fallible than a human being in some ways. People fall asleep, people call out for their shift, they get sick, they make med errors. Technology is usually pretty consistent, especially if you've built a robust plan with some redundancies and backups and things. It's pretty reliable. And I can tell you from 6 years of experience that we've tracked the numbers, and we have a lower incidence of reportable events, medication variances, all that kind of stuff for people that receive remote supports than we do with people that are supported traditionally by staff in the home. So I think the data kind of speaks to that point as well. Another objection we get by staff particularly is that fear of their displacement, that their jobs are going to go away. I think that's extremely natural when a company discusses using technology to perform a job function that was previously yours. I think people get scared that they've seen other jobs get replaced. But what people also understand is that we are in an industry that is notoriously understaffed. So we're not eliminating positions, we're eliminating vacancies, we're reutilizing people where we need them. And in doing so, we're able to control overtime, and we roll all of our savings back into wage increases. So what we can do is we can actually pay people more, because we don't have so many vacancies and such high rates of overtime and things. We've also been able to utilize talented DSPs in higher, more specialized roles. We have technology first DSPs. We have what's called a remote support specialist, and that's a DSP that works at the night shift, providing in-person supports, but they're also providing remote supports by use of a mobile tablet device, and they get paid a pretty handsome stipend for performing that extra job duty. And that's just one example. So it allows us to get creative in creating some specialty positions and some opportunities for advancement in a field that doesn't always have so many opportunities for advancement. And then one of the biggest objections and fears you will hear from management, board of directors is financial sustainability. People worry about working themselves out of funding. If you're not supporting somebody, are you getting the funding? And I think if a state is doing it correctly, it's going to be mutually beneficial. So not only is it going to save state dollars and benefit the system, but it is actually going to allow the provider to, you maybe won't receive quite as much in reimbursement costs, but you're also saving significant staffing costs. So you should come out on the plus ultimately if this is being done correctly. And that's been the case for us. And I think that is replicable across the country.
Great, thanks, Nick. I think you both hit a lot of the right notes around the challenges. So folks on the call, if you do have questions, please use the chat in the meeting, and we'll make sure we get to those questions. I'm quickly going to kick one back to Kathy because you used the term technology supervision earlier, and we do have a question in the chat about specifically what you mean by that.
Yeah, usually technology supervision, what we're talking about is remote supports or in some way where the caregiver is able to supervise without a constant physical presence. So we're using technology for that purpose. So it's a physical absence of a caregiver, but not an absence of supervision when we're bringing in the technology. So that's what we refer to when technology supervision.
Right.
Again, another one of those state to state,
Sure.
terms or conversations. Yes.
Thanks for clarifying that with the definition. So I want to loop back with my next question to something Nick was touching on around specialized tech roles in your organization. So when I was with a provider organization in Pennsylvania and we were launching assistive and enabling tech within our org, finding champions internally, and you've got this wide, my experience, you have this wide range of a spectrum of skill sets within especially your frontline workers. Some are very tech savvy, some are not. They're more tech averse. And can you talk a little bit about how you found and unearthed these folks who you got into these specialized tech roles and kind of on these tech career paths? And this goes to both of you because Kathy, I'm sure you've had this experience as well.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Kathy. I'll let you go first.
Sure. So I would say, we did an intentional reach out to see who had a natural tendency and interest. Being as large as we are in the state, we have 13 different regions. And so we were able to reach out to each one and really determine where are our key advocates for technology, and then really start to educate and teach them the things that they would need to know in order to help move things forward. One of the things that has been very helpful in our state is that it is required legislatively that we talk about technology at every annual meeting, every 45-day meeting. So legislatively, it was dictated and has us helping our staff learn how to have that discussion around the use of technology for the individual served. So we started by that natural reach out of trying to find those people that had the interest and then nurturing their abilities in knowing how to have that conversation and how to be aware of what technology is out there and what their resources are. So making sure that they understood their resources as far as, not only myself, but technology companies that are out there that can assist them, different assistive technology companies that are out there to assist. So all of that was around that learning process. And it's a big reach sometimes. You talked about, Nick, the staff challenges that are there. Not only do we have individuals who are maybe not quite as tech savvy, but we have individuals that are just plain against technology, and they can actually, without the proper information and learning, can sabotage a situation that you're looking at implementing technology. So being aware of what your individuals or your staff in that home, what the configuration is, and those that are advocates for it and those that are maybe not. One example is we had a situation, a gentleman, one of our direct care staff, was getting 60 hours of overtime, and he did not want to give that money up. So he, on the backside, sabotaged in explaining to family and people that this wasn't appropriate for this individual when it was clearly an appropriate move. So, you have to you have to be aware of that and make sure you've got the right people in there supporting the projects as you move forward. I think I got a little off conversation there, but yeah, that's essentially what I wanted to say. Nick, go ahead.
Okay, well, I think what I have found is that the staff that we had already identified as being, really person-centered, and the people that understood what it is not to care for somebody, but to support them in directing their own life. The people that are really good at that and got it, I think that skill set lends itself really well to technology, because that's very much what we are doing with tech. Is we're stepping back and we're allowing a person more independence in their life. And so the staff that got that are going to get technology. I will add that there is not necessarily an overlap between really good, really person-centered DSPs and really tech-savvy DSPs. Sometimes those are two extremely different things. And in some cases, it's meant that we had a great DSP that just was not a good fit for somebody's technology transition. But in other cases, that really great DSP that gets the core concepts but isn't necessarily tech-savvy may still be suitable, because they're not always they're not front-end technology users necessarily. Oftentimes it's operating in the background. So in other words, they don't have to be the ones that know how to fix it when it breaks or update it when it needs an update. It's probably more important that they understand that their role is not to do for, but to help somebody do for themselves. And then if they get that, I think that we can educate them on how technology is going to be incorporated into that process. So we tried to identify DSPs that were really person-centered and provided excellent DSP supports prior to the technology discussion ever happening. Out of those, we preferred people that were tech-savvy to a degree, because that maybe does save us trips to the home fixing things if they're on site and are able to perform those roles and update and change batteries and stuff. And then we kind of just weaned it down. And now that we've been doing it for long enough that we onboard all of our new hires through enabling technology concepts, and we do trainings and orientation, and that's a good point to see what new people are coming to your organization that are interested. You can kind of tell if somebody's glassy-eyed and bored with the discussion, or if they're engaged or interested, and that might be a good point to identify some new talent in your organization that acts as a tech champion. Also extremely important that your tech champions that truly believe in this stuff are there, because of the family members are going to trust them and their opinion more than they are me and our management team. They trust the frontline DSPs because they've known their loved ones for many years, oftentimes, and they have trust in them. So if they believe in it and they buy in, that's going to do way more than I can to persuade a skeptical family member, or even to allow someone to have faith in themselves that they're more capable than they previously thought, and that they are able to live more independently, and they don't need staff all the time, and help them kind of understand that possibility. So yeah, the frontline DSPs that are willing to champion the fundamental concepts are super key. I think you're muted, Paul.
Yep.
There.
Thank you. So have you set up any mechanisms aside from adding training for all new staff, but any regular drumbeat, like technology-based meetings or forums that you hold, or any ways to introduce your staff to the new concepts or new technology that come out? I'm curious maybe how you, aside from just onboarding folks initially, how do you keep uplifting everybody in your organization? Any thoughts on that?
Well, we have a few ways of that. Some of it is for individuals who are currently using the technology, because there's a lot of questions that come up, but there's a lot of continued learning, and at times things can maybe not be functioning the way they expected it to be. So having meetings with the tech company who is providing that service, so that we can do some clarification, make sure that we've got all our plans in place. So we'll do meetings with those agencies that we're currently working with in existing sites. But then for overall, the whole state, we try to bring in different providers that want to introduce a piece of technology or a way of doing technology supports that is new, and continue, because as you all know, technology is continually evolving. I always find new products. We have different formats and places to learn about those products. And it's helpful if I set up those types of training, similar to what you guys are doing today with your provider who's coming in to have that conversation. You will find there are many people out there that want to help you know about what it is that they have, and that's been great. Our staff really like learning about some of the newest pieces of tech that are out there. And then we also have a share moment where people can share how they're using tech, and so that all of our regions can hear some of the new ways to implement and utilize technology. Not only look at using tech for overnight supervision, but how can we use technology to help with individuals who have extreme medical issues, where we might be looking at biometrics or looking at their continuous glucose levels, or looking at their seizure activity. So we have a whole focus around some of the medical supports, or early fall detection is another one we've been doing a lot of. And then the other one is more behaviorally related. How can we use biometrics to take a look at the different changes that occur in someone when they're starting to feel more behaviorally upset and agitated? And how can we maybe use technology to support the individuals when they maybe left site and we're concerned where are they at? Are they safe? Through GPS tracking or through cameras, those types of situations. So we've been able to use it in many different situations to help the individuals have a more successful experience.
Yeah, so in addition to our onboarding, which is it's a very tech focused portion of that, we also encourage all of our DSPs to get shift certified. I think we have about 20 some odd percent of our agency, our DSP workforce is shift certified. That's a cool process. It is a credential that the employee will carry with them for 3 years, and then they'll renew potentially. They'll take it to whatever provider they work at. So it's a career development opportunity that is also very educational and involves, depending on what level, it involves ongoing education. If you're one of the higher credential levels, you're going to be required to take so many continuing education hours a year, and you're going to learn about various new technologies and vendors and things. So we definitely encourage that. We try to incentivize it through reimbursement payments. Usually we'll give somebody a bonus if they complete a certain level, that kind of thing. At one point we experimented with raises for completing various credentials, and staff were actually more interested in one-time bonus payments, which are actually cheaper to us in the long run. So that was a bit of a surprise, but that really helped incentivize some of the people that were maybe more reluctant to do it for not as tangible a benefit as money. So that's one way. We try to send people to as many conferences as we can afford. Tennessee does a tech summit annually, and we always send DSPs and person supported. Yeah, gosh, I don't know. I think that when technology starts becoming more of the rule at your organization than the exception, as people work in different homes, they get exposed inadvertently to a technology which they will realize might benefit somebody else they support. So I have a lot of staff approach me and say, well, I noticed that I think Sally could use a med dispenser like Bob does. And we'll go, well, that's really interesting. We hadn't thought about that, but we understand that you know them best. Which also leads me to the point that I think involving staff in the conversation as early as possible is going to educate them and kind of create ownership in the whole process. So rather than involving the staff person after you've met with vendors, after you've performed tech assessments, involve them during the assessment, involve them during the meeting with the vendor or the vendor selection process. Just as early and as often as you can possibly involve them, the more useful input you'll get from the people that know them best, and the more buy-in and ownership over that you will create as well.
Nick, that was thanks so much for sharing about shifts education. I do want to mention one thing. It's actually a 2-year accreditation, or not accreditation, but 2-year certification or credential. But it can be renewed rather easily. But everything you mentioned about shift education was spot on, and we appreciate that support there. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we appreciate you guys. We've loved the shift platform.
Thank you.
And just along those lines, so the providers and the passes and DHS individuals are going through shift training, and a large part of that is creating that culture of thinking about technology first. And what I like, just to glom on what you said, Nick, that's part of it, getting the mindset correct. but then experiencing tech. So as a DSP goes from home to home and just sees it in action, I think really does start to proliferate that mindset even more. Because a lot of times you can convince somebody by seeing and doing a little bit easier than otherwise. So it's good to hear that that worked. So when we talk about within your, so this is, you know, talking about tech within your organization, but there's obviously external stakeholders, right? There's funders, there could be obviously case managers, there's government officials, there's, you know, if you're an MCO state, there's that group. What have you focused on in terms of talking with external stakeholders to help pave a smoother road? And maybe if there's any objections that are unique to some of those stakeholders that you want to share, that would be great.
Well, I guess I can go ahead and start. You know, depending on the stakeholder, if we're talking our case managers, who are the ones who approve the funding for the supports that we're doing, when it comes to them, we put out a coordinated effort with our local provider organization to educate the case managers on the technology itself. And we're fortunate enough to be able to work in combination with DHS, who is fully in support of implementing technology. In fact, they have goals to increase use of technology themselves. So we were able to coordinate between DHS, some local assistive technology providers, some local group home agencies, to bring this training and information to case managers who are brand new to learning about technology and maybe would have been more resistive in the past. So that has been a huge break for all of us in helping the case managers feel comfortable in implementing tech. And they, as you mentioned, as they start to see it being used by one individual they're working with, they start to see other places that it can be applied. They see the success that happened for one person, and they start, you know, asking for it in other places. So we've seen not a lot of resistance anymore from those groups. We have pockets here and there that maybe haven't learned yet the information, but the goal is to get out and to reach all of the different counties across the state at this point. And we are not an MCO provider or a state, so we're reaching out individually to each county. So that's one way. When it comes to families, that has been a little different. It can be a family that is very tech savvy and, again, very much wanting the technology there because they're individuals asking for that level of independence, and or we may see behaviorally some things that happen when staff are there that if we had technology there instead, we would not see the behaviors. So the family is very willing to try and see what we can do in regards to technology. And then, of course, we have those that need to be brought along in the process. They feel like they're losing a staff. We're taking something away from them, or that their person just has to have a staff person there because of the what ifs, just in cases. So, you know, there's a whole, again, this could be a whole presentation on how to speak to families about the use of technology. But we've developed some ways to bring that conversation forward and to help them come along in the process. And I will tell you, there's situations where somebody will say, absolutely no, don't even talk to me about this. I'm not interested. And what I say is, I get it. It's okay. I'm not going to, we're not forcing this. I just want you to, would you be willing to sit in and listen and learn about this a little bit more? And most of the time I get a yes, that yes, I'll listen. And it's a slow process. Sometimes it has taken us 2-3 years to get it fully in place and on board after having those initial conversations. So, and sometimes it just goes in a couple months. So it really, everyone's individual in how they look at technology. And I find a lot of it has to do with what they know and what they've experienced. We do have some videos that we've developed through the local provider group We have probably, I think, 5 or 6 different videos of people talking about their experience in using technology. So that is kind of some testimonials to the use of technology that has been helpful that we can share and pass on to them. If you all are interested, you certainly go and look at it. It's with the, if you Google ARRM, Technology Resource Center, you'll find some of those videos on there that you can share that talks about how, the process of going through technology, and families that say, originally I was really scared and against this, and now it's just, it's working out really well for my person. They love it. So those kinds of experiences that they can hear, or people they can hear from, is helpful as well in having them move along in the process of adapting it. So, and ultimately, we talk about how, years ago, we developed, or we actually set up unknowingly a dependence on staff for everything. Now we're looking at how can people do more for themselves. So when our staff are no longer having to come in and out and turn the television station every 5 minutes, they're able to focus on what's most important. If we can get the individual to be able to do more for themselves, it helps everybody. Helps the individual be more independent and autonomous, and helps our staff be able to focus on what's most important.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely start with family members and conservators as the major external stakeholder that can be a challenge. I was naive and optimistic enough once to think that everybody could be made to understand the benefit of enabling technology if only we presented it in the right way. I've come to learn that that is not the case. There are some family members who will absolutely never believe in the concept or understand it. And I think that's okay. You have to know what battles to fight, and there's some that you're not going to win. But there are many people who have seen the benefit, and some of our biggest skeptics and critics have ultimately become some of our biggest champions. One family in particular was a major critic of the organization. When I first came, they had major issues with previous management and things, and they very skeptical, and they were also kind of older traditional country people and didn't understand or like technology to begin with. Within a few years after us beginning that process, their adult son with Down syndrome was living independently in his own apartment, being supported remotely at night. And they spoke on some testimonial videos that Tennessee provided about how happy they were and how proud of him they were to move out. And so those wins can be achieved, and sometimes they can't, but I think the ones that you can win are worth fighting for. The way we've tried to persuade people that's been most successful is we first of all, we started with our easiest wins, our kind of our sure things, the people that were the person served that was really on board and really gung-ho and didn't have much family at all, or their family was super supportive. So the easy wins that we were able to kind of use as marketing materials to show that this does work, and here's how we've improved this man's life because of it. And seeing that helped convince people that there was nothing I was going to say or do that was going to convince them. But if they saw it with their own eyes and met that person and visited their home and things, that they finally understood and trusted us a little bit more. So yeah, start with your easy wins and don't be afraid to show them wherever you can. If you have somebody that's on your team that can make marketing videos and little 3-minute video about what that person's life has looked like that you can share, that was huge for us. We did struggle with case managers. In our state, they were called independent support coordinators. I don't know why that was as difficult, other than I think that's just, they were just kind of used to doing things a certain way, and this was totally different. We were very fortunate that our state agency partners were on board and pushing the process, and they were helpful in kind of moving some of those skeptical ISCs in the right direction. I get the feeling that Arkansas has probably got the same resources that'll help there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in regards to speaking to the families, one of the things we started really trying to do is bringing in, when we're having those initial conversations, the actual data of what's happening. So if we're looking at technology for overnight supervision, we bring in the data as what is the staff actually doing on the overnight? What are the needs that are really happening? Where the families thought, the staff were, having to do lots of things in the middle of the night, we come to find out that instead, the only thing happening is John might need a drink of water, or, Sue's socks might be falling off. So these were the things that we were able to address in different ways, and have conversations around. Do we need a staff person in that environment all night long just for that reason. Is there something else that we can do? So really looking at what are the technology solves. First, we looked at did the needs assessment of each person, figuring out what is the needs on the overnight, collect the data, bringing the actual facts so we can have that conversation. And we also talked about if we have a staff person there who is sleeping, if something happened on the overnight, and we're allowed sleep staff. Not all states are allowed sleep staff. But if our staff is sleeping, what are they going to know? Will they know if John walks out the front door? Will they know if Sue gets up into the refrigerator in the middle of the night? So most of the times, no, they wouldn't know those things. So the technology is actually better in those situations because we know what's going on in the house with different sensors or different things. So really helping them learn more about how the process works and what the actual staff are doing on those overnights. And then for day shifts, if we bring in technology for during the day, it was helpful for the families to see that they still had people they could reach out to and get support from during the day. And in our homes, we might have 4 people in them. 3 people can go out and do something that they want to do, but the one person who doesn't want to go out can stay home and watch television and still have the support that they need. And so that was a very helpful thing when people could see that now our staff, instead of having to keep everybody home because we only have 1 staff on, because we're in a staffing crisis right now, we were able to allow the people the choices of what they wanted to do.
Great. So I have one wrap-up question. So we have a couple of minutes left. So try to have you both, try to contain this into a minute answer. I did not prep you for this one, so I apologize in advance. But you both have a wealth of experience. You were both on the sort of the bleeding edge of technology first in your states. A lot of folks in Arkansas, this is very much brand new, right? So they're hiring tech champions and they're recruiting a tech team internally. What do you wish you knew, whether it was 6 years ago, 10 years ago, whenever you started your journey early on, that obviously you know now? Is there anything that stands out? Boy, I wish I knew the first couple of months or year, something. I'll let you fill in the blank.
Oh, I have a long list of what I wish I'd known in the beginning. I'll just come with the first one that came to mind. I think I wish I would have known that I spent a lot of time educating and getting management on board. And they were pretty much on board from the beginning. They saw the benefits from the beginning, which I was grateful for, and the support of the having a tech a person. And then, but beyond that, in order to find the people who really were going to be appropriate in an agency as large as ours, I needed to get down to the frontline supervisors to really help educate them more than anybody else. Because otherwise, we went through several layers of management until the frontline supervisors even had the opportunity to think about this and find the right people. So I'd say make sure that your frontline management staff is the main ones that you're communicating with and educating. And that's what we're in the process of trying to do right now, is to get to those frontline staff on helping them, because they're the ones who are interacting with the individuals the most, know them the best, know the families the best. So those are the ones we needed to get more time with. And that would be my big one.
Thanks, Kathy. And Nick, in the last minute we have here.
Yeah, so I'll agree. I think if I could do it over again, I would have done a better job of involving family members and DSP, direct support professionals, in the process from the get-go. I think our major stumbling blocks came from the fact that they were scared and sabotaging our efforts, whether intentionally or incidentally. So I would have done that differently. I also think if I'd have known, we maybe would have done this sooner. I don't think there was anything necessarily preventing us from doing it other than just we didn't know what we didn't know. So I think it's something we could have done 2-3 years before we ever started.
Great. Well, I want to thank you both very much for your participation today. A lot of incredible information. For folks on the call, we're going to be communicating out this video. Hang on, please, because we've got Ken Smith coming up from Next Gen AT. But I want to close off the discussion portion of this. And I also just a quick preview of what we're doing next week. So I'm going to share my screen. Probably I could just read this, but I'll share it. So next week, Kathy is coming back And we're going to have a conversation specifically about talking with members and families and caregivers. And then she'll be joined by Nathan Gerhardt from Keystone Health in Pennsylvania. And then on August 1st, our own Annie Eubank, Project SME, and yet to be named guest are going to be talking about environmental controls and how to make anything smart. And yes, I did ask Annie if she could make me smart. So we will see if I fall into the category of anything. So again, thank you so much, Nick and Kathy, for your participation. And now I'd like to hand it over to Ken Smith. So Ken, I will stop sharing.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Let me start out by just saying that as I've been listening in here, by the way, Kathy, good seeing you again. It's been a while since we've talked. The information that they shared with you, really, I would come back and watch this video again, and let it sink in, because they really provided some excellent information, for you moving forward. I was really impressed with what you guys had to say. So great job. So just kind of starting out, my name's Ken Smith. Actually, I'm out of Ohio. And I've been doing I've been in the tech first IDD space since before it was tech first IDD space, before it was cool, is what I like to say a lot of times. That back in 2011, I believe, is when I stepped into this space, and the state of Ohio was just kind of getting started with utilizing remote supports and some other types of technologies in our support models. And so it was really the Wild West of getting things started. Nobody really had, state-wise, there's a couple states that had the service, but nobody really had made any great strides. And we were fortunate in our state that the leadership on all levels were kind of pushing things in the same direction. And I'm hoping that that's what we can see in Arkansas as well, as the same type of concerted effort. So just a little bit more about where the journey came from. We started doing remote supports. I helped the state draft language to bring in assistive technology. It's not perfect. We got some things we got to work on there, but the main thing is that this journey that we're all you guys are getting ready to go on, that we've been on, you have to be patient with. It takes time. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of repeating yourself. So just get used to that, because obviously you got new people that show up and they need to learn what you've picked up over time and what Kathy and Nick just shared with you. I also provide consulting for the state of Ohio for their Department of Developmental Disabilities as their tech first consultant as well. So where NextGen came from, and what our vision is that we set a vision to change the way human services are delivered, and by using technology. Myself and the late great Dustin Wright, we kind of got together and we started bouncing around ideas of what is it that will help, because we were both firm believers in the tools of like remote supports and assistive tech. So we were asking ourselves, what is it that needs to happen in order for this movement to move forward more rapidly, to gain some steam and so forth. And at the time, there were very few vendors that actually operated in this space. And so one of the things that we determined through that conversation, and from some of the things that you just heard that can happen internally within your own organization, of sabotage and stuff like that, imagine doing that as a third-party vendor where you're coming in. And I have stories that I could share as well that I won't go into right now, but there's definitely a benefit to doing it yourself. And that's one of the things that we recognize, is that trying to do a tool like services like remote supports, assistive technology, trying to bring somebody in from the outside to provide that, while it has some benefits in the fact that you don't have to stand up that business line, you can just let somebody else do it. It has a lot of challenges when it comes to continuity of care. just the whole culture around it. If the organization, the provider organization, is not culturally changing around the technology, then it's like bringing in a foreign object, foreign substance into your body. It starts to reject it. And so I think there's a lot to that. And so what we came to a determination of is that we needed to take the knowledge that we had over myself doing running remote supports operations for about 10 years. And Dustin, I think at the time, he was probably doing it for about 15 years. We wanted to take that knowledge that we had learned, and we wanted to pass that on to the local provider agency. Nobody understands the needs of that individual like the local provider. Listen, again, going back to what the presenters just spoke about, one of the things that I think is extremely important is they talked about getting down to that front line, getting to those DSPs, getting them to be on board and to understand and to buy in and to get the information about the individual so that they know this is a good fit. And so, long story short, because it is a rather long story and we're trying to do it in about 5 minutes or so, we decided that we wanted to start by building a platform for remote supports. We felt like that was the most logical one because there's already a reimbursement structure in place in many states. And so that's the direction we went. So instead of kind of contrasting this, instead of the provider, if you're a provider agency is listening to me, instead of you going out and trying to figure this out yourself, like Kathy did, like Nick did, in some cases, trying the DIY route, or going out and contracting with a third party where, again, you have strangers providing the service. This is a way where alongside us, we don't leave you alone. We don't just sell you something and say, okay, good luck with it. We provide you the hardware, the software, and the knowledge base in order to do remote supports. So real quick, what I want to do, though, is I want to define what we mean by remote supports, because I recognize not everybody may be familiar. And when you get into different states, you get into different nuances when it comes to remote supports. So I'm going to define it according to how I see it, and then let you guys take it from there. So remote supports to me is, and especially when we're talking about the equipment itself. So first, remote supports is staff at a distance. If you just can kind of wrap your brain around that simple definition, instead of staff in the home, it's staff at a distance. When we're talking about the equipment or the technology that goes into the home, the way I see remote supports defined is this is the technology that the caregiver uses to support the individual. It's not the technology that the individual uses to support themselves. That would be assistive or enabling technology. And the reason I define it that way is because we want to make sure that when I'm talking about remote supports and when I'm talking about what we're offering, is that basis is the technology to support the person. That doesn't mean that the off-the-shelf shiny objects and things like that people like to integrate into solutions like it doesn't mean those can't be done. It just means that at the core, remote supports needs to be, the technology side of it needs to be focused on just those pieces that help the caregiver support the individual. And I say that so that if we get into conversations later or what have you, that we kind of have a firewall between those two definitions. And so we understand that what NextGen is offering first and foremost is that that tool set that helps you provide support for the individual on a remote basis. We're at about 7.5 minutes. I think it was 5 minutes I was shooting for. Sorry about that. And I think we wanted to open it up for questions. And I hope you have some questions. There are no dumb questions, or at least they say that.
Ken, I want to jump in here real quick from Shift.
Yeah.
If you're taking Shift education, you might hear remote support under the same umbrella as enabling technology. I actually like what Ken said there really well. Please understand that as a new field, terminology is evolving. It's changing, and we're figuring it out. And if you ever worked on any kind of project, you know, oh, we called it this, but now that we know a little bit more, that might change a little bit. So if you hear that in shift education, don't let that confuse you. I think what Ken said is spot on there. I like the idea of enabling technology. I'm helping myself, remote technology, getting help from another person at a distance. I love that distinction. Don't let that hang you up in the shift education though. Okay. That's all I want to tell our learners.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's important. The reason I bring it up like that is sometimes there's a lot of emphasis when we're talking about remote supports of training the individual on how to work with their remote supports.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to point out is there should be very little that the individual needs to know about interacting with remote supports outside of the communication tool, which is normally some type of a two-way communication tablet or something where it's a button that they push. Other than that, they really shouldn't have to know a whole lot about or even understand that. They will. I've been in enough homes that when somebody's given a tour of their home and they receive remote supports, with pride, they will go through and they will show you the door sensor and the camera and the motion sensor, the things that allow them to be independent. And maybe that's really where I should have started with the story. When you see, and what sold me, I did not come from the ID space, by the way. What sold me on this service was when I started seeing the lives change. And when you see somebody who their entire life, they have had somebody hovering over top of them, helicopter support 24/7, and they realize that they can have time by themselves, or after they've had that time by themselves, you start to see that they are capable of doing things that nobody ever thought that they were going to be able to do. That will sell you on this type of service. And, you know, I always joke around with the individuals that I used to support when I was a vendor. Is my goal is for you to feel comfortable enough to sit in a beanbag in your underwear, eating Cheetos, watching TV. You should feel that comfortable in your home.
Yeah.
And so most people are not going to feel comfortable if they've got staff all the time there. There is a place for the direct support staff, and there's a place for this remote supervision type of model. There's a lot of benefits. I hope I get a chance to talk to you, some of you, about this tool so we can kind of get into the details. But it's more than anything, the changes that it makes in people's lives will just blow your mind. You're muted.
Yeah. So Ken, with a couple minutes left, if I'm a provider, you mentioned you're providing the hardware and the software, and then do you also help with the organizational structure and processes that a provider would need to actually be able to stand up your tool and use it effectively?
Yep. Yeah, it's a full turnkey solution where we're providing that knowledge base of how to stand up this new business line.
Are there any other questions for Ken? If not, we'll be providing Ken's contact info and the website. It's on the sort of the vendor list that we've been providing out. There'll be a link on the website that we'll be releasing next week. So plenty of ways to get a hold of Ken. Our SMEs are going to be well aware of Ken and his services, so they can help direct you to him as well. So plenty of pathways to get to Ken and more information about NextGen AT. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for joining. We will see you again next week for talking to families, members, and caregivers. All right.
Thanks.
Have a great week.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.